Hi everyone, it's Danielle, and here we are with another episode of Kind of Crafty. Alright, for this project today, these are the things that you will need. You'll need some burlap fabric. You'll need some twine. I have green and brown twine. You might need some greenery. Then you will need some glue sticks and glue, or a glue gun. And then you're also going to need some fabrics. You're going to want orange fabrics for this particular project. So I usually do a variety. You'll also need some rolls. These are paper towel rolls. You can also use toilet paper rolls, and you can just clean them up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be completely clean, but I like to try to get it as clean as I can just because sticking stuff to it. But it's not going to matter. So you can just take them as they are. And then I've also going to use an X-Acto knife, and then I've also got some scissors that are my fabric scissors. And let's get started. First thing is that you're going to want to cut your rolls into 3 different sizes. Now you can do 2 one size and 1 a little bit longer, or 1 little shorter and 2. It really just depends on how you want to do it, but I like to do them in 3 different sizes, and you'll see why coming up later in the project. They aren't going to need to be perfect. You can measure or not, just depending on how you want to do it. And then what I do is I cut down on the sides. I usually either cut twice, or sometimes I'll cut 4 times down the sides. And I go about halfway, maybe a little less than halfway. And what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting things down so we can get it curled up so that it looks like a carrot. And that's what we'll be making today, is some fabric carrots. So just cut some of the pieces off. I try to cut it at an angle, and then fold them. And again, I just kind of play around. They don't have to be perfect because you're going to be adding stuff to it. But then also, if you ever buy a bag of carrots from the store, they're not the same, they're not perfect, they're all different shapes and sizes. So really, it doesn't matter. You just want it in basic carrot shape. So here I have 3 different ones, 3 different sizes, and I had cut those and then glued them. You can also tape them, doesn't really matter. Then I'm taking some polyfill and just filling those carrots up. You can just shove it in there. You can also add some beans or lentils or anything, rice, something like that, if you want them to be a little weighted. For me, I was fine with just putting the polyfill in there. And you'll want them to be stuffed just so that they don't cave in. So then once you do that, then you're going to want to get your fabrics, and you're going to be cutting them into these strips. These are some leftover from when I've made some before, but I have 4 different fabrics here. I have 4, even though I only use 3 carrots per my little bundles, but we'll get to that a little bit later as well. So here you can either measure it out or you don't have to. I just cut a little bit and then I just pull it because I want that look of the fabrics kind of fraying and everything. So you don't need to worry about that. And really, if they're bigger on one part and smaller on another, that's not going to matter either. So you'll just take your fabrics and cut strips. You just cut a little bit of a notch in your fabric, and then you'll just pull it, and that will make your strips. And I'm sorry I go out of the camera. Still trying to get used to this new mount for the camera and lighting. And so I apologize that it keeps going out of frame for you. Again, just eyeballing it. And depending on the width of your fabric, you'll need either 2 or 3 strips, and also depending on the size that you make your strips, and the size of your carrot. So those 3 factors basically determine how many strips you'll need. So you just cut your fabrics, and you'll see here the reason that I chose 4 different colors at the very end, and I'll show you here in just a minute what you can do with some of your fabrics as well. So you'll kind of want to de-string your fabrics and get them laid out, but you'll see you've got darker or you've got lighter, and you can do it directly on the cardboard little containers if you want, but I prefer to do it a little bit different because I feel like you can see through it a little bit, and I don't want that coloring back behind. So I take a little bit of that polyfill. You can either do polyfill or you can do batting and wrap it around, and then you'll put the fabric over the top of it, and that way it just sort of adds a little cushion, but it also helps that color be more clear and vibrant than if you put it on top of the roll itself. So here I am just gluing on some of this, and it doesn't have to be perfect. This is one of those crafts where, you know what, anything goes. You choose. If you wanted to do purple carrots, you could do purple carrots. If you wanted to do white carrots, you could do white carrots. Anything you want to do. And here I'm like, you know, I just added a little bit of that polyfill in on a space there it was a little bit thin. So really you can just add it where you like. I try to glue them down a little bit, but you don't need tons of glue. That's not going to matter. It's just to help hold it on there, because you're going to put the material over the top, which is also going to help hold that on. But you're just trying to get that in a fairly even amount. So once you've got that, then you're going to want to add some glue to the top there, and you're going to want to glue down your fabric a little bit to get it started. And once you've got that started, you can decide from there exactly how you're going to wrap it. Now, I tend to start at the top and go towards the bottom, but you're going to want to try to overlap it as best you can as you're wrapping it around. And you just keep going down, and you'll see here I'm like, you know, it's kind of coming undone up here, so I'll undo it and go back and re-wrap it just so that I can get that overlap a little better. And then here we go, just wrapping it again, and we're going to wrap it all the way down to the bottom, and it's going to go a little below with this one, a little below where the roll is, but it doesn't matter because you're just going to make your tip however you want, and again, not going to be a problem. So here I just didn't like how the material was standing up, so I went ahead and folded that down and in, and then I took another piece of material because some of those overlaps were kind of poking out, and I wanted to wrap it just a little bit better, and so I put another wrap on. I didn't go all the way to the top and bottom, and around each layer again. I just went here and there, and you can kind of, you know, see where bits and pieces are coming undone, and you can just adjust it however you want to. And there's your carrot. So for your carrot, you can do a few different things. This is some greenery that I had left from a Christmas project, and so it does have some silver glitter on it, which is why I decided not to use this, but you can use something similar to this if you want to. And what you do is you'd cut some off and you just glue them down in there to get your little green sprouts of the top of your carrots. So that's one idea. And then another idea that you can do is you can take your green twine and wrap it around your fingers, and I just wrap it a few times. Really depends on how big you want your sprigs to be for your carrot. And I took it off my fingers, held it at one end, then I cut the other end so that, you know, it would make it a little more like sprigs, and then just fanning it out a little bit. And then you can take glue and just glue it in there if you want it like that. So that's a second idea. And then the third idea is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take some of this, and it's green materials, and I'm going to cut that into strips, or a strip. It's thick enough that I don't have to do more than one strip here. And we're gonna cut that down to smaller strips till I feel like it's a good length. And then I'm gonna take those, I'm gonna put a little glue, fold it in half at like a little bit of an V angle, and then I'm gonna put a little more glue and fold it over once more. And then we're going to stick that into the top of our carrot. And we're just going to repeat that process over and over. And don't worry that this material frays. It just kind of adds to the character of your carrot. So really it's not that big a deal. You'll just keep going, and you will keep making these. Now I like to do it at different angles and such, so that, you know, it looks a little more random, I guess you could say, because I don't want anything to be perfect. These are not perfect carrots by any means. They are just going to be what you want to do, and we're just continuing to make more and more and fill it up until we like the look of the little sprigs coming out the top. So here we go, we continue on, and you know, you can do 2 or 3 at a time, or you can do them individually. It really just depends on what you want to do. And again, you know, with this burlap material, don't worry about the fact that it's shedding and not perfect or anything. Now with sticking those in, I noticed that the top had come undone a little bit, so I went ahead and put just another round of the material. And then I'm taking my green twine here and just putting it around the top. First layer, I generally put a little bit of glue, and then I just like go ahead and put a line and just wrap it a few times, and it'll stick here and there. You don't have to, again, do this perfectly by any means, and you can wrap it around the top as much as you want. And you could even take it up into that burlap a little bit more and make it a little thinner if you wanted to. I try to stay on the top of the carrot just because I like how it makes it look. And once that's done, you've got yourself a carrot. And here we go. Here are 3 carrots that I've done. And you'll notice I did brown twine on one of them just because I wanted a little something different. And they're different sizes and shapes, and so then what I do is I usually take the longest 2 towards the bottom and the little one on the top, And then I take my brown twine and I put it underneath those, and then I tie them together. And then I wrap that twine around a few times because I want it to be secure. And then we're going to just tie it tight, make sure they stay together, and readjust them as needed. And then I'm going to cut that twine and tie it in a bow. And I mean, at this point in time, you don't have to do a bow if you don't want to. You could just tie it and leave it at that. Or you can do what I'm doing here, which is tie a little bow. I like the little dangling down just because I think it looks kind of cute and country. And then I decided I want a little bigger bow. So I just loosely go over some spread out fingers, and I, get that twine and I put it together and pull those little ends down because I want more dangles, and kind of even them out a little bit. And then I take another piece of twine here and just wrap it around the middle of that bow to hold it together. And I'm going to wrap it around a few times and then tie it so that it will hold that bow together. And again, cut those ends so they're all kind of there. I'm going to adjust it, and then I'm going to glue it to the center of that bow and just hold it till it's kind of stuck there with that hot glue. And there we go. We've got ourselves a little collection of carrots. And you can always age these if you wanted to, or leave them as they are. You can really do whatever you'd like with them. And here they are in my little Easter display. I've put them on the top of my two-tiered tray, and I just think they're a really cute little addition to add a little bit of country flair. And then I've got one by itself. You can either tie a bow around that, add a little greenery if you want, a little bit of this and that, or you can just leave them plain like that. So that's the end of the project. Thank you for watching, and remember, if I can do it, you can do it. Bye.